couple goes for a drive and stops to play an online game. That decision cost them nearly $1,000. It's still up in the air whether Windsor International Airport will keep its tower. We take a close look at what exactly it would mean if we lose NAV Canada support. A live look at our city there. You can see some of the snow from last night's snowfall, and you might be pleased to learn, if you enjoy the snow, that there's a chance of more to come. Colette Kennedy will join us later in the program for the full weather forecast. I'm Katerina Georgieva. Chris is away. We begin tonight with breaking news. Employees who showed up at JD Norman Industries this morning were told they were out of a job. They had no idea it was coming. Jacob Barker is live on the scene right now outside the manufacturing facility. Jacob, what exactly is the situation now?
Yeah, Kat, so what I'm hearing from the workers here and from the union is that they showed up this morning and were basically told by security that they'd been let go, that they should just go home. And the union says, I spoke with Emil Nabout of Unifor 195. He says that they were totally blindsided by this news. They had no information about it ahead of time. What they do at this plant here is they build parts for GM Motors, and they've been doing that here for the last 17 years. What they are asking for is for the company to reach out, because nobody's actually sat down with the company at any point to discuss any sort of closure agreement, and that's what they're hearing, is that they're going to close this plant down. So right now we are just really learning what has happened here. We haven't had a chance to reach out to the company as well to find out what's going on, but we're certainly going to do that. They are asking for the company to come to the table and negotiate a decent closure agreement with the union, something that hasn't happened until now. Kat?
Thanks so much, Jacob. The CBC's Jacob Barker reporting live outside of JD Norman. Windsor is getting its first look at the proposed city budget for 2021. This as the city faces a more than $30 million deficit because of COVID-related losses. But today, administration is proposing freezing the tax rate. With more, I'm joined live by the CBC's Sanjay Maru. Sanjay, we know that COVID slammed the city in terms of revenue. So how exactly would it be possible for the tax rate to be frozen?
Well, Katerina, the city says it's all because of the education levy. Now, that's what the province takes from your property tax bill to help fund schools. The province is taking less of that this year, so the city is using those savings to help fund many of its operations for 2021. Last year, the city brought in about $426 million from property taxes. This year's proposed tax freeze, of course, means that wouldn't change. And those savings I mentioned a moment ago amounts to $10.5 million. So the city is using that money to make up the tax freeze. And Katerina, as you mentioned, the city taking a big hit this year due to COVID-19, almost $38 million to be exact, because of more money spent on PPE, Caesars Windsor being shut down, reduced municipal revenue. Now, this $33 million shortfall is not being factored into the tax freeze. The city is hoping upper levels of government fork over the cash, but it's also looking at other options if that doesn't happen.
Say we receive nothing from any other level of government, which I think is highly unlikely. But say that were the case, what has to happen, and Joe, please correct me where I stray here, is that the city is required to fund the deficit in the next year. And that could be by simply cutting capital projects. It could be looking at some capital and tweaking some operating spending. It could be issuing debt. You may issue one-time debt to say that's how we're funding this one-time expense.
And to clarify, that $33 million COVID-related shortfall was originally pegged at $38 million, but upper levels of government have already committed just more than $5 million to Windsor for 2021.
So, Sanjay, the mayor pointed to a few options that could be considered if upper levels of government can't help with that shortfall. But how likely is it that the city would get the help that it's hoping for?
Well, Katerina, the city today says it can't imagine that upper levels of government would not step up. In fact, officials pointed to Toronto, which is facing an almost $900 million hole in its budget due to COVID-19, where that city is asking for much more in funding from both the provincial and federal governments. But according to a political science professor I spoke with, getting that money is going to be a tough ask.
It's all well and good to say we want to go to the feds or the provinces to make up for the shortfall, but they already have enormous debt loads and enormous deficits that they're dealing with. I mean, ultimately, we're all going to be footing this bill one way or the other. As you know, the cliche is a real cliche. There's only one taxpayer. So whether we pay it in terms of higher rates for property taxes at the local level or higher income taxes at the federal level, at the end of the day, we are the ones going to be footing the bill.
And despite the tax freeze, the city still proposed new capital budget investments for things like parks, roads, and active transportation. That amounts to about $170 million for 2021. In fact, Windsor is projecting that by 2030, it will spend roughly $1.6 billion on these kinds of investments. Deliberations on the new budget start February 22nd. Katerina.
Thanks, Sanjay. The CBC's Sanjay Morrow reporting live. So far, there's no information on whether or not stay-at-home restrictions are going to be lifted, with the emergency order expiring next week. But the health unit says we are moving in the right direction when it comes to COVID-19. Our person positivity rate is down to 4.5, still fifth highest in the province, but we were in first place not too long ago. Active cases are sitting at 405. Today, 41 new cases were reported and 2 people have died. The health unit also gave a warning to those using illegal drugs. There has been a spike in overdoses. There were 22 fentanyl-related emergency room visits between January 27th through February 3rd. 16 were overdose-related. The health unit is asking drug users to be aware, take precautions, and carry naloxone. A Chatham-Kent long-term care facility in outbreak has had its first death. Fairfield Park in Wallaceburg says a resident died who had tested positive for COVID-19. According to Chatham-Kent Public Health, 88 people are currently infected with the virus between both staff and residents. This is the first major outbreak in a long-term care facility in Chatham-Kent. A Kingsville man is planning to fight a ticket he was handed for playing Pokemon Go during lockdown. It's a situation that highlights confusion around COVID-19 rules and what residents can be fined for during the pandemic. CBC's Dan Takema has more.
My mind was blown. I was very angry. I couldn't believe that I was being given a $750 ticket for sitting in my van.
Matthew Steves says he and his wife have barely had a moment alone for months. But when they went out for a drive and stopped to play Pokemon Go Wednesday, their brief getaway ended up costing them $880. Steves says the couple was in an empty church parking lot in Leamington. An OPP officer pulled up and asked them what they were doing. When he told the officer about the game, Steves says he was handed a fine for $750, which adds up to $880 when tax is included. The OPP confirmed a ticket was written for failing to comply with the Reopening Ontario Act. In a statement to CBC, provincial police say, "We continue to urge everyone to voluntarily comply with the rules and recommendations from health officials." OPP say officers can ask people to identify themselves if they have reasonable grounds to believe someone is violating the act. Steve says he and his wife were the only people inside their van, and he doesn't see how taking a break and staying inside a vehicle could risk spreading COVID-19.
I'm sure there will be people who say, hey, well, you got to follow the rules. It's not an essential thing. What's your response to that?
This lockdown's been going on for a long time, and we're all a little bit stir crazy. We've been looking at the same walls for almost a year now. So, any chance we can get to get outside, if we can do it in a safe way, I think that would be beneficial to everybody.
Steve says $880 could buy a lot of groceries for his family. He plans to dispute the ticket. Dan Takema, CBC News, Windsor.
The emergence of COVID-19 variants has some health professionals questioning common activities and their perceived level of risk. And according to one expert, masks, physical distancing, and hand washing are still effective, but some adjustments might be necessary.
Yes, distance. Where do we wear masks? For example, outside, most people are not wearing masks, even though they're within a 2-meter distance. That is something we can look at as well as the variants begin to spread, because these can take advantage of any opportunity where we're not protecting ourselves.
Despite the rapid spread of more contagious variants across the country, the Public Health Agency of Canada has not made any updates to its guidance for the public. Windsor's health unit says there have been no confirmed cases of a variant in our region. There was a significant drop in Windsor's unemployment rate last month. It fell from 11.2% in December to 10.3% in January. Canada's economy lost nearly 213,000 jobs in January as restrictions to curb COVID-19 were put back in place. Justin Trudeau says lockdowns have been necessary, but he points out Ottawa has been working with regions to support those affected.
8 or 9 out of every $10 spent on pandemic supports during this pandemic has come from the federal government, not provincial or territorial governments. We are there to support Canadians, and we will continue to be until we get through this, with income supports, with vaccines, with health measures, with the supports that people need.
The national unemployment rate inched up to 9.4%, the highest level since August. Nearly all of the losses were in part-time work, with retail, accommodation, and food services hit the hardest. Canada now has 858,000 fewer jobs when compared to the same time last year, pre-pandemic. The Windsor Assembly Plant is shut down for 3 weeks. It's because of a global shortage of microchips that are used in the components in the vehicles. The shortage is affecting other operations as well.
Ford has cut production in North American plants, in particular at their F-150 factories in the U.S. General Motors and Stellantis have cut shifts here in Ontario. The list of automakers affected by this continues to grow almost on a daily basis. And I spoke to some folks just this morning who feel like this will be a bumpy and lumpy first quarter for sure. Things might not get back to normal on the inventory side until probably sometime in March.
The problem stems from the shutdown of auto plants last year because of the pandemic. That led to a decrease in demand for the microchips made in Asia. So those companies then turned to supplying companies that make consumer electronics, like TVs and smartphones. That demand went up. So now there's not enough to go around. Shutdowns at some Ford F-150 plants in the States will affect workers at the Essex engine plant as well. 2 shifts will be idled there on Monday, but it won't be shut down completely.
We've been notified right now, though, in our plants, we're just looking at down days to make up for it, but we'll see. They'll reevaluate as it goes on, but to know that Ford Motor Company is taking shifts out of the best-selling vehicle in North America, you know what I mean, and their most profitable line is concerning, yeah.
Both Layson and Little say this underscores how dependent the North American auto industry is on production of parts offshore. The shutdowns will affect the inventory at dealerships. And if your vehicle needs a part with the microchips in them, you might have to wait a while for it to get fixed. The shutdown is also affecting feeder plants that make parts for the Windsor minivan. The fate of the air traffic control tower at Windsor International Airport is still up in the air. It's continuing to be reviewed by its operator for its long-term viability amid COVID-19. Tonight, we're taking a closer look at what it would mean if NAV Canada were to move ahead with shutting down the tower. The CBC's Sanjay Maru has more.
A fixture of Windsor International Airport for more than 70 years, this is the Air Traffic Control Tower, at risk of being converted by its operator into a flight services station. Officials say doing so would have major ramifications on the airport's revenue and flight safety. So what is an air traffic control tower, and how does that differ from a flight services station?
A control tower, you have flight controllers who basically provide direction to pilots about altitude, speed, how to do it, when to do it, and what speed to do it. So compare that to a flight services station. It gives you information about the weather, it gives you information about the runway conditions. It does not provide any instructions to the pilot in terms of how he or she should be operating the aircraft in terms of approach or landing at the airport.
If Windsor becomes a flight services station, how do pilots ensure the safety of their crafts?
They have to advise air traffic control, and air traffic control would then basically provide them with a vector in terms of what direction should be going into, what runways you're going to be landing on.
Where is that air traffic control based if Windsor doesn't have its dedicated air traffic control tower?
It's probably Toronto, the Ontario, FIR areas, so the flight information area that's managed by Toronto Central.
How is landing and takeoff coordinated in the absence of a control tower?
It's the plan saying that at this hour, at this minute, I'm going to fly. So that path is defined.
What would be the biggest challenge for pilots in Windsor if the city was to lose its control tower?
Someone does not show at the ground to communicate with the pilot, or immediate tornado, or an animal just crosses the runway, which within a few seconds, nobody can do anything. So in those situations, yes, there is some risk involved.
Would Windsor International Airport take a financial hit from losing its control tower?
Many planes, especially when it comes to private airplanes, they would not risk going into an airport that there is no control. So yes, there will be reduction in their income, yes.
And despite issuing layoff notices to workers in the Windsor Control Tower, NAV Canada says it has yet to make a decision on if the tower will be shut down. Meanwhile, local politicians are continuing to appeal to higher levels of government to step in before NAV Canada forces the tower's operations to stay grounded. Sanjay Maru, CBC News, Windsor.
A live look at our riverfront there. We had some gorgeous snow last night, and there could be more on the way. Colette Kennedy will be with us right after the break, and she'll have your full weekend forecast ahead. Stay with us. Welcome back. Before we get to weather, we have a really sweet story for you. They're the best of friends who've been together all their lives. So when Spike the dog had to have his eyes removed, Max the cat was right there for him. And now the seeing eye cat and his best buddy are looking for a new forever home.
It's a pretty cute sight to see a dog and a cat with such a friendship. They were living predominantly outdoors, and I think having that warm spot to kind of go together, I assume is kind of where that friendship probably started from. You know, they kind of had to live on their own against the elements outside. I call Max more of a support cat for Spike. It's not so much that he's leading him everywhere he can go. Blind dogs do learn how to do that a little bit on their own, but Max just provides a level of comfort and support for him. He can smell him, he can feel him, and so it's kind of a way to bring his stress and his anxiety down. And then Max does a really good job of checking in on Spike. Spike had to have both of his eyes removed. He did have severe cataracts that were causing him pain. Right now, they're stitched up and we're just waiting for them to heal. Once Spike has his stitches removed, we'll make a post on our page, kind of going over their story and letting everyone know they're available for adoption. They're really just looking for a quieter home and someone that has the patience to be able to work with Spike to show him his new surroundings, and then just someone that can provide a nice home environment for Max to go to. Spike is like the world's kindest dog. Literally, as soon as you stop moving, he has found your leg and he's pawing at you and he just wants to snuggle. And Max is a very curious cat. He's constantly keeping us laughing. So yeah, I feel like they're both very different in their personalities, and I think they make a really great pair.
Colette Kennedy joins us now. Colette, my heart.
I know. That's what when they talk about animals that are bonded pairs, boy, oh
Yeah.
boy, there is a bonded pair.
Oh, it's so amazing to see that. It's so sweet.
Yeah, I love it when different species too, like, you know, a duck that's friends with a cow, like whatever, there's these combos like that. I love it.
I know, I
too.
love seeing pairs like, I just, you know, just animals, creatures being sweet to one another. It's just that these are the kinds of stories we need these days.
Yeah, we sure do. This one especially special there, the way the cat's helping him out. Okay, your current temperatures, I don't know, my contours have decided to disappear. That's the colors that are normally underneath, but just take it from me, it would be very blue on this map right now in terms of the colder air that has moved in, because you can see as we look up here towards what the legend is like. But temperature is -8, feels like -7, or rather it is -7 in Chatham-Kent. It feels like -15. Let's get that right. Feels like -16 here in Windsor with our winds. Now the gusts are still there, and we're going to continue to have some of these gusts out of the southwest really kicking up the lake, right, as well. Some of the waves on the lakes, but for tomorrow starts off still pretty strong, and then as we go into the afternoon and evening hours, they will let off a little bit. Areas prone to lake effect, it's going to be somewhat nasty, and we do have some poor driving conditions through some of these areas, and that kind of carries on then for the next 24 to 36 hours. So that's especially over towards the Bruce Peninsula and the Lee of Georgian Bay, over towards the Niagara region as well. We're dealing with some of the flurries, at times bursts of a little bit of light snow, but mostly it's just that flurry activity. And then we have another system I want you to know that's going to be coming through. That is popping through Saturday night into Sunday, so 2 to 4 centimeters possible as this moves through on us. And just know as well that, of course, we're keeping the cold air in place. Sorry about that. So look at, I know you probably can't believe it. Is that for another city? No, Kat. This is the forecast, and those are the numbers.
Thank you so much, Colette. And hey, before you go, happy Super Bowl Sunday.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I can't wait.
Enjoy. Thanks so much. Now, when we come back, speaking of Super Bowl Sunday, while that definitely means, you know, a lot of excitement for those of you who are big football fans, but it also comes with a stern warning from health officials. Stay with us. Welcome back. Canadian actor Christopher Plummer, who enjoyed a distinguished career in theater, movies, and television, has died. He won an Oscar, 2 Tonys, and 2 Emmys. But for millions around the world, this is his best-known performance. Such a classic. The Sound of Music came out in 1965 and has become a film classic, though Plummer said over the years that he hated the movie and found it awful and sentimental. Plummer grew up in Montreal. His early successes were on the stage, including Henry V at the Stratford Festival in the 1950s, and he went on to find acclaim for his television and movie work. In 2012, when he was 87, he became the oldest actor to win an Oscar for his role in Beginners, where he played a man who comes out as gay after the death of his wife. He died at his home in Connecticut of complications from a fall. Christopher Plummer was 91. This weekend, health officials want you to stay at home to watch the big game, Super Bowl, of course, to keep from creating any further super spreader outbreaks. And there's another reason to watch from home. Some Canadian talent will take the stage. I don't wanna touch the sky. The Toronto-raised R&B singer is to perform at the Super Bowl halftime show on Sunday. It's always one of the most watched performances of the year, but this one may top them all.
I definitely want to be respectful to the viewers at home. The story will continue, but definitely will keep it PG for the families.
Now, we don't know much about the performance itself. We know a stage is being built within the stadium rather than the usual center field setup. About 1,000 people are putting work into the show rather than the usual 2,000 to 3,000. Other than that, The Weeknd will only say that the performance continues the story that he's been telling through his recent songs and videos. That is it for CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, you can go to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor, and you can find us on social media as well. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The Rick Mercer Report is up next. Have a great night and a wonderful weekend.